Here we go. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on, party people? It's your boy, Coach D Brown, former big leaguer with the Kansas City Royals. I got man, I am sorry we're coming on so late, man. It's on me, man. My boy been waiting on me, about to leave, holding up his business. I ain't seen my man, and at least his screen face to face. I ain't seen my man in over 15 plus years, man. It's good to see him. But anyway, I first met this dude. He was an intern over at the now, IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. And we hit it off. Always real cool. All the top level athletes and, the who's who, especially in the baseball and the football world at that time, guys going in and getting drafted was there, training, working hard. And, you always, end up hitting it off and being cool with, a lot of the trainers that you work out with. And so this particular dude I'm about to introduce to you, we were always cool. And he took what he did over there in IMG, branched off, and now he done built a powerhouse over there in the Miami area where I'm talking about dudes. He's going to tell you who's coming in, but I'm talking about the who's who of Major League Baseball, minor league baseball, professional football, college guys. He's telling me, I asked who's coming in because this is draft time. He's going to tell me, man, who ain't coming. You know what I'm saying? That's how he got it right now. You know what I'm saying? That's how he's doing it right now. He's just doing it big time. What's up, Bubba? What's up, Alicia? What's up, Mark? So without further ado, all right, Pete, hold on one more second. Listen, we have my program over here. Listen, hitting, defense, offense, fielding, downlight drills, and we got a little athletic stuff. I ain't gonna talk too much because my boy Pete gonna downplay, the program I got on here, but he gonna talk about what he got. But my man too high, he too big time for me, man. You know what I'm saying? So I gotta get him when I could get him, man. So but anyway, all of that is involved and included in this Big League Shortcuts training system. All right. The link I will put on here, but I had the technical difficulties. I just had to make this happen. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you my boy, Pete Bommarito. All right. And Pete, if you can, man, introduce yourself to the audience. We have, if you could kind of talk from the beginning, where you started from, where you from, all the way to where you are now, that all the top athletes, are working with you. If you can kind of start from the beginning all the way through, I appreciate it, Pete.
Yeah, for sure. I started as a strength coach at Ball State University. Then I ventured down to IMG, where I met D Brown and, among others, football, baseball wise. I branched off my own about 2005. I came down here to Fort Lauderdale area, and it's just grown since then. I think I did an internship with the Colts as well. And, all that kind of experience in college, pro, and then with international corporation like IMG, I kind of took pieces of what I learned from each spot and kind of developed this vision. This is a vision I've had in my head from as far back as I can remember in terms of what I wanted to do from, youth, adolescent development all the way through elite and professional athletes. And that's what we do. So we run Bommarito Performance Systems, which has a facility in Davie, which is Aventura, Florida, and Aventura, which is more North Miami Beach. And we have a draft prep affiliate up in Pittsburgh. We have a draft prep affiliate in Houston. We have a bunch of consultancy things that we do internationally, especially down in the hot baseball markets of like Venezuela and Dominican Republic. We've been branched out that way. And, it's exciting times, that's for sure. So we definitely have our locations where we train athletes, we train regular people, we train rental fitness from as young as age 7 all the way through professional. I also own Bommarito University, which is an educational-based system. That is mainly for online programming support, a lot of education for trainers. We're certifying trainers and things like that. So we try to bring it all together in terms of bringing the best, most revolutionary style of training and education across the board.
Crazy, man. Yeah, I went through the site and, saw, who's who, the Bommarito University. Tell me a little bit, what is the Bommarito University? What does that consist of, Pete?
Well, we have a members-only website at 2 levels. One level is mainly for a lot of times sport coaches that just want to get on, see a bunch of sample exercises, get videos of things, read articles, and mainly just sample programs. Like we put sample weeks of things that people request. We have a premium level, which is mainly for trainers. That goes into a lot of the scientific detailed coaching videos, webinars, and more advanced sample plans, mainly for athletes. We also have the educational workshops we do online and we do live. We do like week-long mentorships for trainers that really want to get involved in the hands-on experience. And then we also have the certification stuff that we run. But the main thing is we have a training app now, and a lot of people purchase online programs, or a lot of trainers and different strength coaches will buy like online programming support for very, very specific needs. And it's going well. Our main thing is we want to make sure that we reach anybody and everybody, no matter where they live or what their financial structure is. We try to have a product for everybody from an educational standpoint.
Nah, cool, man. So we talked briefly, man, but I want to know we're going to, parents, that's coming on, always ask your questions, man. We kind of go from there. You said that you started in, mid 2000s, branching off of ING. If you could just kind of give me a list of Major League Baseball, we'll start with baseball because I know you know the who's who of football too, but give me the names who you started with until all the way now, the Major League guys that you work with, from back then to where you are now. Just give me a few names.
Yeah, I mean, our biggest claim to fame initially was a guy like Raul Ibanez, because when I met him, I mean, he was fear of the DH. He wanted to continue to play, but when he got to the age he was at, 2005, that's the standard thing. Once you have an injury, and you're a good hitter, they try to DH you. So I met him and kind of showed him the blueprint of the medical-based stuff that we do. He responded great to it and went on a tear. In 2009 was having an MVP season, made the All-Star team for the first time. I think it was like age 36. And I have very similar stories like that in football. So I kind of be named, known as the guy that could take a guy that was apparently past his prime and make him have a new prime. And then we had, young guys like Mike Napoli. When he started with us, he was real young and stayed loyal and consistent with us. And then, when he went on that tear in 2011, I mean, it was just very, very special. And then since then we had JD Martinez, who started with us very young, and, now look at what he's doing now, and then we've also got, the guys like Miguel Cabrera. I got him, when he was playing for the Marlins at the time, that's when I met him. And then since then he's had spectacular career. And now we got all the big names like Hanley Ramirez, Wilson Ramos, Tommy Pham, Salvador Perez, Carlos Santana, Carlos Gonzalez, Yasiel Puig. We've got a lot of guys in and out of here, Pablo Sandoval. I mean, and it just keeps growing and growing. And we're definitely very proud of it. We'll never take credit for athletes' success, but definitely I think the one thing we do well is allow people to peak their genetic maximum and maintain it in the season. And, it's from an injury prevention standpoint, from a performance standpoint, I think we do a good job because we have everything in-house. We have not just a training facility, but we have a full medical center with 14 different medical disciplines. We have an in-house nutrition center, supplementation, and we just teach people the art form of recovery, regeneration, but most importantly, making the training specific to your body. And I don't care if you're 7 years old or you're a JD Martinez that's tearing up Major League Baseball right now. You can easily customize a program specific to your body if you understand the medical and the biomechanics behind the scenes that goes into different levels of force and stress. And that's always been my mentality. I was medically trained, and, I think that philosophy has permeated through my staff, and that's kind of where we're at today.
I mean, so for the people that are coming on, what's up, Jerry? What's up, R. Corey? What's up, B. Webb? We have world famous trainer Pete Bommarito on. I try to put the title up there, but because I didn't have the time to put just because we were streaming on quickly, I haven't had to put I know my listeners. I put you up early on the Facebook page telling you people was coming on, but I just think when they're looking and they seeing you, they're like, who's that name? Whatever. But that's why I'm trying to let talk about all the people that you train. Now we talk baseball, but give me some of your football names that you done train a little bit too, or still train.
Yeah, I mean, some of my bigger names is guys like Le'Veon Bell, Frank Gore. The interesting part about that is I met those guys coming out of college, preparing for the NFL Combine. And like Frank is a metaphor for what we want to get accomplished. You know, he's a guy I met, feels like 100 years ago now for NFL Combine. He was my first draft prep guy when I broke away from IMG.
No way.
I built my own thing. I recruited him, and you know, he had the long storied injuries.
Yeah, two knees. He blew out his knees, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you know, he was a guy that people were questioning why he came out early, was even going to be able to be durable enough to play in the league. And you know, it's a stupid way of thinking of running backs being devalued or running backs having a short shelf life. I mean, if you have talent and you train specific to your body, special things can happen. And Frank has literally been with me every year since then, with the full program, from not just the training, it's the medical side, the preparation side, the recovery, the regeneration, how you eat, how you supplement, how you sleep. I mean, everything goes into it. And he's like a poster boy for everything that I believe in, and a guy that really takes what I believe in and takes it to heart. I mean, it's not just about working hard, it's about working smart. That's what people have to do, even at young ages, when they're going through their growth spurts, when they're trying to play a prolonged season like baseball. Baseball is unique because you play all year round. You have your summer wood bat leagues, and you have your fall ball, you have your season. And you have to understand there's certain training loads that map the different seasons with the ultimate peak of where you want to be at the end of the spring season. You know, and that's what we do well, even with the younger age kids. You know, it's a blueprint of success of customizing it based on your body or your growth spurt or your season or your injury history. And if you put a lot of detail and thought into it, it can be done and done well. You know, Frank Gore is a poster boy for that. Or, you know, this past off season, we had Stephon Diggs, we had Tyreek Hill. From the lineman standpoint, you know, we got Marcus Gilbert on the O-line. We got guys like Chris Jones on the D-line. You know, Chris is interesting because I met him through draft prep. He could not have done any better for himself at the combine and pro day. And he's a guy that's came back every single year. And, you know, he could be one of the best defensive players in all of football right now. For what he did this year with the Chiefs is something very, very special. We also, you know, even a guy like D Ford, same thing, draft prep guy, continue to train, continue to use our blueprint of how to take care of his body. And he went on a tear. We've also, you know, different guys like Von Miller been through the door, Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski. They were my first draft prep guys when I broke off and moved over to Aventura. You know, way back then, I mean, it was that first year I had on my own when I opened up my Aventura facility. We had all the guys that were kind of unknown and question marks. You know, Antonio was supposedly too short and too slow. Rob Gronkowski had the back. Jimmy Graham was a basketball player. Jason Pierre-Paul was too raw and too skinny. Carlos Dunlap was too young and too this and too that. And you look at Navarro Bowman. I could go on and on that first draft prep class, and now every one of them has been all pro, all world, all everything. And I'm very proud that we were able to get them, you know, drafted where they needed to get drafted and continue to use that success in the league. So yeah, we definitely have a good pedigree of all sports, but, you know, football, baseball is definitely from a professional level. That's probably my most famous names.
That's what's up, man. So now you get into, in Paris, I see the questions coming in. I'll get them to you.
Here we go.
So now you are, you know, high level. And so when did you start transitioning, start working with youth teams and youth, you know, sports and baseball players? And, you know,
I mean, believe it or not, youth has always been my passion. That's what I went to school for. My medical background and biomechanics background was geared towards what my passion is. And that's training kids correctly throughout what we call peak height velocity. And that's a growth spurt. And everything I learned at IMG, it was an interesting place because we were working with pro athletes at age 12, 13, 14. Mm-hmm. We brought in some great sports scientists when I was there that taught us how to train young kids, because that's what we were saddled with. And I got so much into the science and the biomechanics. You know, I had a vision that this style of training applies to everybody, not just the kids that are lucky enough to get scholarship to IMG or the parents that have enough money to pay for it, that you can bring that science to the masses. And that's what I wanted to do. That was the whole vision of why I wanted to start my own thing. And what I started noticing is what the way we develop kids when they grow, you know, they have the neurological breakdowns, they have stress on joints from growth spurts. Those very similar processes of resetting the nervous system and taking pressure off the joints is analogous to a pro athlete that has trauma in season and coming off injuries. And I started working with a lot of older veterans, like we mentioned, Raul Ibanez and Fred Taylor, and these guys that when I met them, they were apparently past their prime. Then after training with me, they started having a new prime and really having some of the best years of their career when they were supposed to be done. And I started looking at the medical and the science, and you can really map it out. A pro athlete injury is analogous to a young kid that is going through a massive growth spurt. And we use that philosophy across the board. And it's been very successful for us. I kind of fell backwards into the pro athlete thing. My vision was middle school, high school kids.
Really? What is this? This ain't even in the questions, man, but I get a few. I'm gonna get around to your parents, I promise. But what is I'm gonna use you up to why I got you here. I'm gonna use all my, I hear this growth plate in the shoulder area. Like I've heard that the last 3 or 4 years dealing with baseball players, growth plate issues in their shoulder more so than I've never heard of it, honestly, until the last 4 or 5 years. What is the reasoning behind it? Is it always happen, or is it just now they just know what it is? Like, I don't know if you deal with those type of injuries or.
I think the main issue is kids are specializing in sports young and probably too young. So it's inevitable. I mean, kids want to do what they're good at. I mean, that's why I was. I liked all sports, but I played the sport that I was good at. Kids want to gravitate towards what they're good at. So if you're seeing somebody that is passionate about baseball at a young age and they want to play all year round, you have to map out what is appropriate for the body. The growth spurt is such. I mean, when the bones elongate and the growth plates form, there's a certain style of training that needs to be mapped towards that growth cycle. It doesn't nothing to do with age or gender or even chosen sport or volume of sport. It's got to be specific to the growth spurt. And, we call it the reverse periodization model. So even on my website, I actually popularized my concept of what reverse periodization is. When you're done growing and the growth plates are still forming, you have to be on a reverse periodization model. You cannot progress on load, like how much weight you're lifting. You progress based off volume and time under tension. You cannot axle load. You cannot put a bar on the back. You gotta be even very, very careful with how you load laying on a bench supine, So if you understand what is the issue with kids, they have a lot of issues in the support system, which is the foot and the trunk and spine. And the scapula integrates with the spine. And that whole articulation is very stressful in a baseball player because the human body was not meant to throw, especially the way people throw and especially the way people pitch. So you have to do a lot of work with kids isometrically with spinal rotation, spinal lateral flexion. And it's got to be isometric, and you have to progress based on isometric holds. If you can provide that structure around the skeleton, which is now longer and bigger, and the bones way more, the muscles that cross the joints that move bone, you've got to be able to train it with isometrically and slow time under tension. That is a reverse periodization model. It's very popular in Olympic training centers with young kids like gymnasts. I just mapped that science to growing kids. Baseball is unique because if a kid is young and he hasn't grown yet, or he's going through a growth spurt, and they still continuously play baseball all year round, there's got to be some times where you download the baseball playing and upload the training. And if you put it on a reverse periodization model, you're basically providing the structure that's needed. If you do that, then you take pressure off the labrum and the rotator cuff and everything. It isn't like your rotator cuff's weak when you're young, you got to get stronger. You got to provide the structure around the spine and the scapula of where that rotator cuff articulates. So really what we need to do is just mass educate parents and young baseball players, baseball coaches that operate at that middle school and freshman and possibly sophomore year of high school. If we can educate them on how to do these models, it will work and work very well. And then you can take the pressure off those joints. And I think the reason why you're seeing so many injuries with young baseball players is because we got smarter with baseball. So if they're good, they're going to throw more, they're going to swing more, they're going to play more. We just have to make sure that the sports science catches up to the volume of great baseball coaches that we have. And that's my vision, mass education. So parents and young baseball coaches at least have a blueprint on what to do with their team when you warm up, when you prepare, before you throw, after you throw. There's a lot of science that's great application science right now. And I think we just have to do a good job of getting that information out there.
Oh, that's wow. That's dope. Yeah. So that age, you saying like prevention and, start whatever, what particular age do are you saying 12?
On average, you're looking at females will hit peak height velocity, or what we call puberty in this country, around age 12, 13. Males will hit it around age 13, 14. That massive growth spurt that we call peak height velocity averages about 6 months. But we've seen it as short as 6 weeks, and we've seen it as long as almost 2 years. When you see some people that grow really rapidly, very, very fast, they get kind of clumsy and awkward.
Yeah.
It's because the skeleton is longer, weighs more. The muscles that can't support that skeletal structure or move it needs to be trained. So you have muscle that moves bone and you have muscles that support bone. What we really need to focus on is the muscles that support skeletal structure. So when we do resistance training with young kids, especially in the middle of their growth spurt, they don't really have a rest period. They might have a prime moving exercise like a band row, and you complex it with a trunk isometric or a hip isometric or even a posterior chain upper isometric. When you do that complexing back and forth, that's what kids that are growing respond to. And if they have a rapid growth spurt, you got to get into that reverse periodization model immediately if you want to keep resetting that system of how to move and support bone.
Wow. I need to talk to you behind the scenes about my daughter. Anyway, I'm gonna go start. Matter of fact, I'm gonna do a little different today. Let me get some of these questions from the parents, and then I'll go into my questions. I already been at. I asked 3 or 4 questions that wasn't even on, what I wanted to talk about. But anyway, Bubba from Alabama asks, how does a young athlete get involved with your program?
I mean, if you live in Fort Lauderdale, it's easy to show up. But that's why I also try to do the online training support. So if you go to my website, you're going to see like online programming. You're also going to see, what we call the Bommarito University education. If people want to learn the science of how to do this, they can take workshops, website, whatever. If they just want a program specific to them or their son or daughter or whatever, you can just sign up for an online program. Now, obviously, it's not as good as being trained in person, but a lot of times our blueprint is better than parents trying to figure out for themselves or going to a trainer that might not be educated working with young growing kids. A popular thing we see is a lot of times parents are bringing their kids down on Christmas break, spring break, summer break, at least for a few days. We'll evaluate them, customize it based off the evaluation, show them the terminology, make sure they understand intention exercises, and that sets the program for the online training support. So if that's not possible, I'd say that getting an online program is better than nothing. If it is possible, it's always better to get evaluated and we go from there.
Cool. All right. And I'll put, the links to your website.
Yeah, it's simple. It's bommaritoperformance.com.
Okay. All right. Well, I ain't gonna write that right now. I'll do it at the end. I promise you. I wish I had a chance to put your name or everything before we clicked on, but you know the technical difficulty we was having. So anyway, is there a different training you do for football versus baseball?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at the professional level, there's no question. I mean, some of the basics is baseball players can't bench press. I don't care if they're young and they haven't really chosen a sport yet, you can teach them the art of a press. But once you are classified as an official overhead athlete, and our rule of thumb is when you're good enough in high school that that what you're going to play in college, you're getting recruited for this or for that. If you're a baseball player, if you're a quarterback, if you're a tennis player, if you're a volleyball player, if you're a classic overhead athlete, you should not do any pressing where your hands are fixated to the same system, meaning that you can't bar press. Now, we will do standing split stance band press. We'll do dumbbell single arm press and things like that. But that's probably the biggest difference that comes to mind. With football, we also do a lot of Olympic lifting partials. I don't believe in Olympic lifts for any athletes, but I will definitely do partials, like clean pull, snatch pull from various levels, because it does work on great concentric power of the hips. But with baseball players, even the Olympic polls are questionable. There's so much more ways to gain power specific to baseball, which is rotary power. But again, you got to be careful with how aggressive you rotate with a power-based system. Now, we use med balls, we use bands, we even have a Kaiser pneumatic system that we use, but we implement chops, lifts, pallet presses, and things like that, because you're able to get the rotational power component a baseball player needs, but it's great isometric work for the spinal rotators and spinal lateral flexors. So that would be a difference, where football needs brute power, baseball needs more specificity of power. And obviously the movement training is going to be different. It's definitely different the way I train a running back or a defensive back or an offensive or a defensive minded lacrosse or basketball player versus a baseball player. I mean, their movement's very simplistic. You have 30 yards from bag to bag. You have a forward multi-arc run. In the outfield, you've got your lateral motions, you got your back lateral run, back angle lateral run. So if you want to get specific movement-wise, you look at the movements required for sport, and there's training system to enhance those motions. So those are the biggest differences, off the top of my head.
Nice. I'm gonna get back to that benching and stuff like that too. But Mark in Indiana asks, high school age kids, do you individualize training, or is it more of a group program?
It's got to be a group program, because at high school, you also have to look at budgets. When we train teams, obviously there's a price per hour. When we train kids that come into my program, you sign up for a month program, you pay your rate, you can come to the classes, but we have a class size of, let's say, one coach for 8 to 10 athletes. So we have a coach to athlete ratio we promise based on the price point. So we have to be conscious of the fact that people have budget issues and people have lives. I mean, it's hard to ask a parent to drive their 14-year-old kid to our facility 6 days a week, 2 hours a day. So we're always going to be confounded with that. But even in a group setting, you can customize it. That's the key point. That's what I think that we've really perfected. And that's the main thing people seek us out for. You have to train a team. You have to train a group. How do you customize it? Number one, high school age kids. Are they going through a growth spurt or not? Most boys, freshmen in high school, are still going through a growth spurt. Females might be done, because females technically grow faster than males. The second thing is that's always number one. Number one is, are they going to be on a reverse periodization model, or what I call the ice pyramid system? If you're growing, you go to ice pyramid. If you're still growing, if you're done growing, you go to ice pyramid. If you're still growing, you got to go in reverse. So that's the hardest thing. If you're training a baseball team, and we do it a lot, where we consult and train baseball teams where everybody's together, whether you're freshman or senior, you got to have an A workout and a B workout. A squat's a squat, a hinge is a hinge, but what's the difference? Where do you load them? A fully grown athlete can axle load, meaning put a bar on your back. A growing athlete cannot. You've got to make sure that you do goblet box squats with heavy tempos and things like that. So you can customize it just based on those simple concepts of what is your sets, reps, and speed of lift, which is tempo. And are you on reverse, meaning that you're progressing based off volume, or are you on the ice pyramid where you're progressing based off external load, which is like the weight on the bar. So that's first and foremost.
All right. So B-Web asks, what's the best exercise for rotator cuff begin training? That was one of my questions too.
You said, what's the best exercise for what? You cut out there.
Rotator cuff. And the second question was, how young should baseball players begin training?
I mean, I think that
training the rotator cuff, I should say.
Yeah. Number one is, think of the rotator cuff. When you're a young baseball player, it's not necessarily that your external rotators are weak and that needs to be trained. The issue is, if you just look at the anatomy, you have the shoulder blade, then you have the socket, and the arm bone fits into the socket. The rotator cuff's job, in simple, non-extreme medical terms, is the rotator cuff holds that upper bone in place in the socket. But the socket is on the underside of the scapula. So if the scapula is out of position and the socket's out of position, you're always going to pinch on the rotator cuff no matter how strong your rotator cuff is. So you go to the source. What is the biggest issue with young kids, especially in the middle or coming out of a growth spurt? Poor posture. What does that mean? The scapula is out of position. What is our focal
That's being
point?
hunched over like that.
Exactly. That's why you see a lot of kids with very poor posture. They sit in class all day, and when they grow, those stabilizing muscles that attach the scapula to the body become weak. It can't support bone anymore, which is why you start to see what people calls like a wing scapula. So what we do for rotator cuff is we have a scapular series that we do with all of our athletes, and we really do it a lot with baseball players, like a prone Y raise, a prone T raise, a prone M raise, a prone W raise, a prone box, and different band forces with all those things. So when we have our baseball players come in, even at young levels, we have a series of incline benches set, really light 2.5 pound weights and really light bands. And we will hit like a 1-3-1. So up 1, hold 3, down 1. The next week, we won't progress from 2 pounds to 5 pounds. We'll progress from a 1-4-1 tempo to a 1-5-1 tempo to a 1-6-1 tempo, meaning that you're progressing based on isometric hold. So any exercise where your body is face down in the prone position and you can move your arms in position that retracts your scapula, that scapular retraction is crucial. And you get it stronger of supporting the scapula by heavy isometric holds. So we have our pro athletes sometimes get to a 10-second hold with lighter weights. So I know it's kind of a roundabout answer, but focus on the scapular retractors, the scapular depressors, the muscles involved in downward rotating the scapula. It's easy to do. It's some of the most easiest things that we teach on our online app is the prone scapular series. Once that is in position, now if you do rotator cuff work, it can actually be efficient. The second answer is, when should baseball players train? This is globally for everybody. When kids are ready to play sports, they need to train. If a kid's playing a sport, there's nothing wrong with getting him to control his own body. The support system prep, the trunk and spine isometric work we do with 7-year-olds, as long as they are mentally ready and emotionally and maturity wise ready to take basic instructions, they need to be training. I get asked that question all the time. I have a grade school, middle school team, and what should our warm-up be? Our warm-up really is not stretching. I don't believe in stretching for young kids. Kids are tight because they're weak. They need isometric strengthening and very, very, very basic posterior chain strengthening, which is very simple to do with young kids if you have, I'd say, the crowd control to be able to control them in mass groups and be able to get the posterior chain work. So we bring bands out, have them do band walks, single arm backward band walks, a lot of the supine hip bridge series, single leg, alternate, double leg. All that stuff is some of the best things you can do with young growing kids, and it can be done very, very early, and it needs to be done very early.
So when you're saying you don't stretch, what age is it, like 14 and under, 13 and under, 12 and under, or what?
I mean, honestly, I think that warm-ups and stretching is vastly overrated. Okay. People get it wrong. When your hips are tight, a lot of times it's because of a deficiency in the support system, which is the foot, or an asymmetry up in the spine. So we notice that even with our elite level athletes, we'll go support system prep, trunk and spine prep. So by the time we actually get to stretching the hips are loose and aligned anyway. Now we'll still put some dynamic stretches through what we call the suspension system, which is the hips. We'll do that, but most of those tightness, the guarding issues, is because of the deficiency in the foot and the spine. And that's why those systems fall off when people grow. If it's not trained properly through growth spurts, it causes more and more problems. So you'll watch us do a warm-up with 10, 11-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be doing our entire back support system moving prep series for about 8 minutes, isometric trunk. Then we spend a couple minutes on dynamic stretches to the hips. And they get flexible quick because we allowed their foot to absorb and redirect force. If you do that, the hips will stop guarding and being tight.
Wow. So now I wish I met you back when I started, man, when I was 10, 11, 12. By the time you saw me, I was already flat-footed, wearing bunions, and always a line. Always had hamstrings. I tell everybody, like, hamstrings cost me millions of dollars, man. And I'm guessing because, like, I would go to my foot doctor, the podiatrist, and he would always be like, man, I don't even know how you're running. You know what I'm saying? Like with such flat feet. you know, because my feet were just always in like that. And I knew that was the reasons why. And I had a high, you know, I say a high booty, but the hips were, you know what I'm saying? So he said my hamstrings are always elongated. You know what I'm saying? So
well, here's an interesting thing. And this is what we've learned over time. And I've got a lot smarter since I trained UD way back in the day when I was young intern / entry-level coach. But what we're finding is this. If you think about everybody that's fast, they all have flat feet. They all have the tilted pelvis. There's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with it is, can you control it? If you look at the support system itself, and when just biomechanically what happens when your foot strikes the ground, you go supinate, pronate, toe off. That is the action when you walk, when you jog, and especially when you sprint. The prime muscle that controls supinate to pronate is the gastroc. Our support system backward series raises the threshold of that powerful gastroc calf muscle.
What is the gastroc? What is that? What muscle is that?
The big muscle you can see in your calf.
Oh, the calf muscle. Okay.
Yeah, you have multiple calf muscles. The big one you see is the gastroc. That is the prime muscle that controls supinate to pronate. So if you can raise the threshold of stored elastic energy in that powerful calf muscle, it will have a better stretch reflex. The stretch reflex is that foot action. So everybody I've ever trained that's fast has a flat foot, because supinate to pronate happens quicker because there's less distance because it's flat. If you train the gastroc eccentrically, like through my system, then definitely not only are you going to be faster and more efficient, you're going to start taking pressure off the hamstrings because you're going to stop overstriding. And that system becomes efficient. The other side of it is, if the pelvis is tilted, that means that you can reflex quicker, which is why everybody fast has a tilted pelvis. But what's the key? Don't fix the tilt in the pelvis because it can't be fixed. You have to look at the spine and how it rotates, the spine and how it laterally flexes, and train it isometrically. Even the Major League Baseball guys we have, our warm-up consists of single arm sled march, because that is concentric hip extension, isometric trunk rotation. We'll do that for 5-10 minutes before we even get into any type of a old school standard warm-up. Because when baseball players are symmetrical with trunk rotation, it realigns the hips. When the hips are realigned, now you can do an effective dynamic stretch through it. So most hamstring issues I see, it's deficient in the foot because the gastroc isn't trained eccentrically, or it's an asymmetry up in the spine, meaning left to right rotation is off. Baseball players are famous for this because you throw from one side and hit predominantly from one side. So spinal rotation is always going to be not symmetrical left to right. If you can gravitate it towards more symmetry in the off season, you're going to have less and less problems. You're going to be a lot faster, more efficient.
Wow. Yep. 10 years too late, buddy. So, but anyway, the good Mark, he said he had to leave, but he said he'd like to tell you, it sounds like this online program will be great for a kid thinking of going to school for sports science. You know what I'm saying? Like, educating wise, right?
I mean, I originally set it up for trainers because I got so many trainers who were asking me, different questions about young kids or different questions about how to train pro athletes. So that was my original intention. Now, to my pleasant surprise, I'm noticing a lot of middle school, high school football and baseball and basketball coaches getting on there. And they might not understand all the scientific verbiage of the premium website, but the basic side at least gives you great exercises, great articles, and very simple programs to follow that can be specific to anybody growing. You can get specific baseball versus basketball, but what's specific to everybody that's growing? Scapular series, things like that. Those types of exercises are work for everybody that's growing. If you're a human being, whether you play sports or not, you're good at sports or not, it's absolutely essential because all human beings grow around that same time, which is peak height velocity.
Bubba asks, how do you determine when someone is done growing?
I mean, obviously, just if you map height, like you remember at IMG, you used to do that, those little height charts for kids. I mean, when you're done, when you stopped your height chart, that's usually when you're out of peak height velocity. Now, some people definitely have a second growth spurt. I mean, that happened to me. I had a rapid growth spurt when I was just turning 15, and I had another one in college. But at the same time, I mean, the peak height velocity, the massive growth spurt, usually get done around age 15.
Okay. B-Web asks, is this push-pull principle significant in preventing? He stopped right there. He said, "Is this push-pull principle significant in preventing injuries?" I guess I don't know. He didn't finish. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe the push.
I mean,
Pull.
he might be just talking about overall emphasis in the weight room. You have if you look at your upper body, you have your press and you have your pull. Your pull is what I call posterior chain work. A good rule of thumb is this: if you want to do dumbbell bench, dumbbell alternating bench, dumbbell single arm bench for baseball players, that's great. A general rule of thumb is you have to have at least a minimum of twice as much posterior chain volume versus your pressing volume. So with baseball players, we will start with heavy volumes of single arm, double arm rows, in position, out position, high position, low position, all different types of rows. And then we'll do a press. Then we'll come back, hit a secondary pull or posterior chain work with some elbow extensor work. That's a good blueprint format of how to train upper body for kids. So that push-pull concept is 2 to 2.5 times the volume of pulls versus a press. So a dumbbell single arm press is great and fine as long as it's set up correctly. You set your base, you take your pressure, the stress off the shoulder joint. But overall, especially baseball, you got to have double the volume.
Okay. Now, you kind of answered mine. So, I mean, you asked the drills and all that. So how you talking about strength training and all that? So how like important is the conditioning aspect of, youth sports, baseball players? Do you believe in? I know well, I don't know. You tell me. This is, we really didn't get deep into it, but like in season type of training for youth baseball players. Should they be running? Should they be, let's just say that age 12 to 14ish, before, high school, they're going to kind of do their thing. But like that middle school age kid, what type of conditioning or, this arm prevention stuff that you're talking about, is that an all season, throughout the season type of thing?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, you're going to have to cut down the volume and the intensity if it's in season. It depends on how much they play. I mean, down here in South Florida, you look at these youth travel baseball leagues, the volume they play is insane. And they play all year round. When you have that peak important spring season, we try to make sure that they train a couple days a week. You build it in the off season, even when you're doing fall ball and training through fall ball, and especially between fall ball and spring ball. People down here have about 6 weeks where we go all in. The goal and the emphasis is during the season, hit at least 2 hours a week, 2 good sessions a week of brute strengthening to try to maintain what you built in the off season. And the great thing is a lot of this stuff can just be done on a field. I literally just had a conference this morning where I was speaking to a lot of lacrosse coaches, and a lot of them were middle school level and a ton of them were high school level. We had a few college level, and they all came with me with the same kind of issues of what does their weight room have? How much do they actually get to be in the weight room? What is mandatory? What's not? And just time constraints, because they need to practice, they need to play. A lot of this strengthening, if you just have people and bands in a field, you can get done a ton of work that you need to do with just those apparatuses. So if you're limited with time and money, just having bands, you could do it at the end of a baseball practice. You could have a lot of the strengthening to preset the joint before you throw, and definitely follow up after you throw. So if you're having trouble trying to control your team, just make sure you buy a lot of bands and get some really good structure, because the majority of that can be done on the field.
Awesome, man. So we those are my questions, because you already talked and you hit my questions, Pete. So Dominic Madristo, he put the link for the people that are listening in to Pete's website. All right. It's bommaritoperformance.com. So, I mean, listen, you hear it, right? I'm, this a lot of this stuff. I'm like, it's, little the movement I understood, you know what I'm saying? The words and all that. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna have to call you in the background, because I got a daughter that be dealing with shoulder injuries and stuff as a tennis player. So I'm gonna go ahead and university stuff just to, give to her, and make sure she handles her stuff. But Pete, so before we finish here, I want to make sure that, do you have any type of final words for parents of, most obviously baseball players and all of that, as far as like, the condition strengthening? I know you said as soon as they basically they listen to instruction, they should be starting training, but you have a little bit more and, also, again, just talk about your programs and everything just one more time again.
Yeah. I mean, here's some general rule of thumb. Number one, encourage your kids to play multiple sports. Okay. I know that kids like this to go what they are successful at, but sometimes you got to teach them how to not succeed as well, how to deal with failure. It's an overall point of just how to deal with life, and from a pure scientific standpoint, it's always better to play multiple sports. Second thing is actually have an off season, no matter what. Even if you're passionate about playing baseball, the kids loves baseball and he wants to play baseball and the parents want him to play baseball, have an off season. There's nothing wrong with fall ball, spring ball, and summer light leagues, but make sure that, one of those seasons is light on practice, light on skills, and light on playing, where you can train through it. You remember the wood bat league we did it in Bradenton? They were playing 6 games a week. We were still able to get 3 to 5 solid training days because there were certain uploads of training, downloads of baseball, and certain uploads of baseball, downloads of training. Okay. The number one thing is encourage them to play multiple sports. If you want them to be good at baseball, play multiple sports. Look at every successful baseball player there is and ask them what they did when they were growing up. They played multiple sports. The second thing is keep in mind that, strengthening, when I use those powerful words, that scares off a mom of a 7-year-old. It doesn't mean go to a weight room and put a bar on your back. It doesn't mean hold weights. Band tension and really light kettlebell, like a goblet squat, things like that. It just teaches intention through the spine. It doesn't mean that you actually have to physically lift heavy weights. Remember, kids, you select a weight to get intention through the spine. You maintain that weight, but progress more sets, more reps, and especially slower tempos. That's a blueprint for what kids really, really need. And it's just unfortunate there's not a lot of specialists out there that know this science and can implement it. But I think that if we really push the education standpoint, we'll get more and more people to understand how to train kids. So don't be afraid of it. Just make sure you seek out the right person.
Well, we got him right here. I got a quick question that came in. B-Web asks, what's your preferred leg exercise? Is it squats or presses? I'm gonna go turn these lights on while you answer that question. Okay, go ahead, Pete. Answer that question, please.
Oh, for lower body, I mean, I'm a big single leg squat guy. If they're old enough and the spine is symmetrical and they're not growing, there's nothing wrong with doing like speed box squats, which we'll do. But my go-to exercise, lower body, and this is even for young kids, Bulgarian squat, split squat, single leg box squat, step up. We have 4 primary things that we do. You can teach young kids Bulgarian squat. You just can't put a weight in their hands. You can't put a bar on their back. You might be able to hold, like a lot of times we have these little light 2-pound plates that we just hold and press together to get the intention of what you do with the hip and the foot. But that Bulgarian squat with the back legs like on a pad, you just shorten the range, you slow down the tempo, and you really work on intention. My go-to is always going to be a roller back leg split squat or a Bulgarian squat for lower body.
I hope. So what is real fast? My last question. Now, I know you were saying the stationary, basically do not have your kid, the overhand sports, right? The volleyballs, the, baseball, why were you saying, I suffered from tendonitis when I first got into professional baseball, throwing all the time from benching, you know what I'm saying? I never, and then I stopped benching with the bench press, bar, until I retired. Why is that? Why does that happen like that?
Well, I mean, no matter how much we train to try to get the right side versus the left side symmetrical, and our goal is to get it as close to symmetry as possible when you train overhead athletes. The fact is that you're always throwing a baseball with one arm. You're always going to be asymmetrical because you're going to have different range of motion of how the upper bone moves through the socket, different ranges of motion in terms of the spine, the scapula, and all that kind of stuff. There's always going to be differences. Now, what we don't want, though, is the symmetry to be so off that it misaligns the spine or completely drops the scapula, which puts pressure on the rotator cuff. So if you're not symmetrical in range of motion and you put both hands on the exact same bar, you're always going to compensate because you have different range of motion here to here. If it's dumbbell, it's free motion, especially dumbbell single arm. Now you're training within the range of what that joint can do and not stressing a joint that might not be as mobile or as stable as the other side. So that's why overhead athletes should just never have both hands fixated to the same bar on a press.
Yep. Well, I learned the hard way, but it's now, I don't care now because I could try to bench the world now, even though I'm not as strong. But now I always wondered that. I was like, I know I ain't never heard it deep in depth like you just gave it to me. They were just like, baseball players don't bench press, don't do this or don't, so it's good that you explain this, man. So listen, Pete, pleasure, my brother. I appreciate it. The link to his site is in the comments. All right. You see the world of knowledge that he's, listen, the scientific, one of the parents is like, man, he got this down to a science. That's right. This is what he does, man. This is what he does all day, every day. And this is why the top athletes come to this man. You know what I'm saying? And, so before I end, just give me a couple names that potentially may be coming down there getting ready for the draft. You know what I'm saying? For my college football fans listening in.
I'm sorry, say one more time.
I was saying, tell me a little bit about some of the names for the college football fans, some of the names that may be coming down, getting ready for the draft, coming down. You about to work with?
I can't say yet, unfortunately. So
okay.
Can't popularize our class till it's done. The agents really want to keep it close to the vest, but we got some good ones. We got some big ones. We got 2 first-rounders last year, and we trained some good ones, that's for sure. So just look out for hopefully the next Ezekiel Elliott. I trained Zeke. He was a first-round pick. We got some big horses coming in on the running back position. Got a couple great linemen, got a couple good DBs, outstanding linebackers, man. It's going to be a special year for us, so we'll see what happens.
All right. So who are the ball players coming in town? They should be rolling in about the next week or so. They're probably there now.
Oh, you talking about baseball?
Yeah, who's coming in?
Yeah, all the guys I listed. I mean, JD's been here whole off season, Salvador Perez, Wilson Ramos. We have our standards in, man. We're going to keep going strong. Miguel Cabrera, we're going to get him back on track and see what happens.
Nice, man. So anyway, like I said, wealth of knowledge, works with the top, man. I appreciate he gave, one of his old boys, man, a little bit of time, man. I know you're busy, man. I know you're a busy dude, P, and I appreciate you, brother. You don't understand. I will put this out here and I will share it. And I hope you share it to your people too, man. And I'll give the links to your programs, man. And, I appreciate you taking out the time, my brother. I appreciate you so much, man.
Hey, no problem, man. It's been fun. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Pete. I'll holler at you, brother.